That was kind of like the crux of that class. So this class, we're going to continue a little bit just on organ donation in terms of someone who's alive. Like, do I have to give a limb or other parts of my body to somebody else who might be in need, somebody who might be dying? Maybe if I can help them with my organs, maybe I should, or maybe I'm obligated to. What about blood? What about bone marrow? What about your kidney or your liver? When you're alive, the question is how much you have to put yourself at risk to help other people, according to Jewish law. That'll be the topic for live organ donation. That's not really connected to actually end of life. That's helping people who might be at the end of their lives, or might not be. But I want to talk about this because we're here. Then we're going to talk today about like withholding or withdrawing aid, withdrawing or withholding help to somebody who's actively dying. So if somebody's actively dying, let's say, and how much, how does hospice, the whole program of hospice play into Jewish law? Like, do we have to, are we allowed, is hospice recommended? Is it something that's okay in terms of the eyes of Jewish law? Or perhaps we should be doing all we can to keep the person alive, and we shouldn't allow the course of their dying to go forward in its natural pace. Meaning, if Judaism puts such strong emphasis on life and sustaining life, maybe there's no room for hospice. Maybe we should just do whatever we can to consistently help the person stay alive. Or maybe there's no room for, maybe we should at all costs keep someone intubated, attached to the respirator at all costs, because life is of infinite value. Or perhaps life is, there's some more relative value to life in terms of Jewish law, and somebody who's and we should understand that if they're in extreme pain, we should try to minimize their pain, but let them die in a natural and a normal way based on their course of like their natural course of their dying process. So that's the questions we're going to talk about today. So let's jump into the first topic, which is organ donation from a live donor. And that's going to be finishing the topic from last week. Any questions before we start? No, I kind of gave like an overview just now. Okay. Yeah.
What if someone doesn't have a
Directive?
and the children, some believe that it's brain death and some believe that it's heart death.
Yeah, that's a complicated. Sometimes they'll call in like or a rabbi or an ethicist to help the doctors decide. Yeah, some hospitals have like an on-staff group of ethicists who are invited in these moments. It's very hard to decide, to figure out what would be the right path. That's why it's very good to have. So we're going to talk about in the next class. This class is going to be about these topics. Next class is going to wrap it all together, because we're going to talk about end of life directives. I'm going to show you the one that Rabbi Weiner and Rabbi Brody put together, and it's going to put all the details that we talked about until now together. So it's worth having it written down beforehand, and you can keep changing it. Like, it doesn't mean like it's your final statement. You write something down. It always goes by your final one that you wrote, your most recent one. So they recommend writing a new one every 5 years. So we actually had an end of life directive seminar with Rabbi Weiner when he was here, and many of us on the spot filled it in. And if you want to change, you could change it. It's not like written in stone. As long as you have something down, and you'll see the unique components of their directive. They have a lot of questions there that help the person who you appoint as your proxy or your rabbi to know, to kind of figure out where you're going, what are your values, to make decisions based on your values. Sometimes you just write do not resuscitate or whatever, but sometimes there's complicated situations that arise and you need a little bit more nuance. So the more details you put there in terms of what your values are, the easier it is for the one who's trying to help you to know what you really wanted. So we'll show that. We're going to go through that in the next class. All right. So anybody on Zoom, do you have any questions there? If you do, please feel free to call out. Okay. All right. So here, let's get going here. Here's where we left off last week. Live organ donation. This is Rabbi Weiner, friend of mine, colleague. He donated his kidney last year. He actually came to Beth Phil to speak like a few months after he donated his kidney. Like kept like he's taking different. He's like resting at different intervals because it's taxing on your body. But he consulted with his rabbis. He's been teaching about this. I shared this, and his rabbi, Rabbi Asher Weiss, is many people's rabbi. He's one of the big rabbis of today. He said, you know, it's not just okay to do it. You should do it. Like it's a mitzvah. If you're able to, and the person, and there's a match and it's needed, it's a mitzvah. Do you have to? He didn't have to. And that's what we're going to talk about today, but he did. And it's definitely a praiseworthy thing. So, no, so he was teaching about this. I thought last week, he was teaching about this for a long time. And so he's like, I might as well just swab while I'm here. And in case that somebody might need something, I have to, I practice what I preach. So they called him 2 years later and like, we have a perfect match for you. You're the perfect match. And he was like, oh gosh, like this is like I tell other people to do it when it comes to myself. So it turns out he consulted with his rabbis, he did research, and he said he just knew it was the right thing to do. So he went in and he donated his kidney, and it was a perfect match, and the person is thriving, and he's doing fine. I mean, the medical used to be at the medicine, now it's very safe to donate one kidney. It's proven very safe. So I don't know, 98% or something like, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's very high. So we're going to talk about like how much risk you're allowed to put yourself in to save somebody else. I mean, if someone's life is in danger, are you obligated to risk your life to save their lives? Or alternatively, there's a question asked of the Radbaz. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Is a real question. There were these volatile, non-Jewish people who approached the Jews, and they just want to play around with them in a very mean way, in a vicious way. And they said, we're going to kill, this is a true story, we're going to kill one of your people unless you donate a limb to us. Like, we can cut off your limb, or we're going to kill somebody. And so somebody asked the Rabbis that question. This was many years ago, hundreds of years ago. Should I do that? Meaning, I just give them an arm and I can save somebody's life. Am I obligated to do that or not? Or should I do it? Or should I not do it? And he answered that if you do it, that's a pious act, but you're obviously not obligated to do it. So that was his answer to that. But if it's going to endanger you, you obviously shouldn't do it, because nobody would say you should endanger yourself to save somebody else's life, because you don't have to do that, because we're supposed to maintain our health and our life. So that was a question that was asked. We're going to see, it's going to be like central to this whole discussion, how much you have to endanger yourself for other people. So let's see. This is just this is their organization, Amatai, the one that Rabbi Shlomo Brody runs. So the obligation to save lives, we have an obligation to do so. Right? So with all things being equal, if you can save a life, do it. Help save lives. That's good. That's a mandate. It's a good thing. It's we're supposed to do it. Not talking about if it's going to harm you. Just overall, to save lives. You shall live by them, not shall you die by them. Life is very important in Judaism. You shall not stand idly by the blood of another. These are verses from the Torah. If you see somebody who's in danger and they're dying, or they're in the process of being harmed, or with danger of death, you should step up and try to help. That's what you're supposed to do from a Jewish perspective. Rambam says it even stronger. Anyone who can save and does not save transgresses. Do not stand by the blood of your neighbor. One who sees his friend drowning in the sea, bandits attacking him, or a bad animal attacking him, is able himself to save him, but does not. One who hears idol worshippers, etc. One does any of these transgressions, do not stand idly by your neighbor's blood. So we should try to step up and help others when they're in danger. So the question is, at what cost? That's going to be the question here. So there's a classic source here that I brought on the top of this. It's a little bit hard to see. I should have made this a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. Anyway, the source basically says that if two people are walking along the path, you might have heard this source before, and they only have one jug. Okay, so I'm walking along the path with this person. Okay, I have a jug in my hand, okay? I have a jug. Can you see over there? I don't know if they can see on Zoom. Okay, I'm over here. I have a jug. This is a person. We're walking in the desert. There's only enough water in this jug for one of us to survive on this path through the desert. It's in my hand. So what should I do? Should I share it with Mr. Whiteboard? And if I share it with Mr. Whiteboard, neither of us are gonna make it out of the desert.
Isn't it the one that needs it the most or something? If you don't need it, the other does.
You both need it. You both need this full amount to survive this path through the desert. If you share it, you both will die. If you give it to them, they'll live and you'll die. Are you obligated to give to the other person? What do you think? So you're not. What?
But your life is
Your life is
there.
Yeah, so that's what Rabbi Akiva said. Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva came and taught, and your brother shall live with you, and to hear that your life takes precedence over the life of the other. Meaning, if the jug was not in my hand, it was just, in a neutral spot, that might be a little bit more complicated. But it's in my hand. I don't have to give up my life to save somebody else. Like I have to be concerned for my life. Very interesting. Ben Petor didn't agree with that. He says they should both drink and die. They shouldn't see the death of the other. Some say that his opinion was like, Hashem could always do a miracle. Like, who knows? Who says that the desert's like just enough for that bottle of water? Maybe you'll both drink and you'll get to the end of the desert or something like that. So
Be another oil.
something like that. Why am I bringing this? Why am I bringing this actually for the topic of organ donation? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, the problem with that example.
Wait, before, can you answer this question?
Yeah.
Are you answering it?
Organ donation is different than the example you just gave, because it seems to me that.
Can you go step at a time? Why do you think I'm bringing it before? Just so you can get I know you're like kind of like a few steps ahead.
Is it because there's always a risk that you could die?
There's a risk here that you can die and you don't have to risk your life to save somebody else. You see that from, I don't have to give my jug, I don't have to give my organ, perhaps to save somebody else. It's going to harm me. Okay. So we see that you can learn that out from that source. Okay.
Problem with those two comparisons is it seems to me that jug one, there's an obligation on both people. Yeah, if the person takes.
Did you hear, by the way, Ann and Laurie? Cool.
The obligation is on both people with a jug, whereas the organ donation, the obligation is only one person, because the person who needs an organ isn't losing, he's gonna go if he doesn't get the organ.
If the person who doesn't have the organ doesn't get your organ, they're going to die. If they doesn't get an organ, they're going to die.
But the jug one, the person who takes the jug is making a decision.
I didn't take it. I packed a jug. I came from home. I packed a jug with me.
No, I understand that, but
That was the discussion.
there's two,
You're getting off of it.
there's two people who are making a decision.
No, because one.
I own this jug. I packed this jug. I have a jug of water. This person did not pack for the trip.
And if he takes a jug, he's killing you.
He can't take my jug. I'm holding my jug.
Yeah, but if he takes it.
Or you give it to him, is a better way to put it.
I'm not.
Give it to him, he takes it, so.
If he takes it, I'm done. Same thing though. If I have someone needs a heart transplant. If I give them my heart, I'm gone. Or if I give them my liver, a large part, like you can give part of your liver, but if you give like all of your, I don't know what percentage of your liver, you can die from that. So do you have to do that? Obviously not. We learned that out from here.
I'm saying there's two people who, I'm gonna say that the giver and the receiver are both equal.
No.
Because one's.
No,
The story.
because God is saying you have a choice. And he is saying he wants you to choose your life before you choose before you choose to save someone else's life in that situation.
But the acceptance knocks the person who gives it off.
But that's a different issue.
Correct. I've not done anything actively. I just withheld aid to them. I mean, every time I don't donate something to somebody, somebody's dying. If you think about it. People are dying in the world, like there's always, I'm not saying it's kind of like a morbid thought. I'm just saying like we do acting actively and passively there's a big distinction there. I've not done anything to kill this person. I'm living my life. I'm drinking my water. They didn't pack their water. Unfortunately, they're in that situation. I do not have to give up my life for that. Okay, you don't connect it.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I have an actual real life story if you want to listen to it.
I
Or
do,
not.
but I do want to listen to it. I think it'll move us pretty far out because we're already a
Okay.
little bit. So can
All
you
right.
hold on to it and
Yeah,
maybe
no,
we'll-
it was a Holocaust story, but it's really happened to my father on this topic.
maybe in the beginning of next class. Is that okay?
Whoops. Yeah,
All right,
that's
cool.
fine.
Yeah, please remind me, okay? Okay, so let's move on here a little bit. So I want to show you. Okay,
What is-
so there's a case in the Jerusalem Talmud, which is connected to this as well. We talked about this at the end of last class. Somebody was held captive of Isi. This is source number 2 here. And Rav Isi was captured, is held captive. And Rabbi Yochanan did not know how to help him because he wasn't very trained in those types of things. She says his language was, you might as well wrap his corpse burial shrouds, meaning we can't help him. I don't know what to do. I tried to negotiate. Nobody listened to me. I don't have the skills to free him. All of a sudden enter Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish used to be a bandit in his previous life. So he had the ability to go save Rav Isi, and he did. He endangered himself to help save Rav Isi. We see from this text, the Rabbaz says that because although he's not obligated to do so, you are allowed to endanger yourself to some extent if you want to save somebody else. We see Reish Lakish did, and we see the soldiers are doing it in Israel. You're allowed to endanger yourself. You're obligated in times of war to save somebody else. So how does this relate to organ donation? We have the case here, responsive Rabbaz. This is the 4th text, which talks about that case I told you about. Let's read it for a second. You asking to infer my opinion regarding what you saw written that a ruler said to a Jew, allow me to sever one of your non-vital limbs, or I will kill this other Jew. Okay, that's a case. Some say that in this case, he must allow him to cut off his limb, since it will not kill him, right? So the Radbaz rejects this. Why? He say the Torah's ways are ways of pleasantness, and it is required that the laws of our Torah should accord with intellect and logic. So it's not logic. It's not pleasant to tell you that you're obligated to give a limb to save somebody else's life. That doesn't align with our natural morality, our intuition around that. So that's what he's bringing like that into as part of the equation. He says, and how could it occur to anyone that a person should be required to allow someone to blind his eye or cut his arm or leg so that the person should not kill his friend? Therefore, I do not see a reason to require this, although it is a righteous act, and praise if someone who can live up to this. I mean, you don't have to do it, but if you do it, it could be pious, but no one's obligated to, because the ways of Torah are pleasantness. You can't imagine the Torah is going to obligate people to have to cut off their limbs to save other people. Yeah.
So if you do it of your own free will and you go into it thinking it's going to be okay, but there's always a risk.
Yeah.
And you don't survive, are you then a revered person, or you've made a mistake in giving up your own life?
It's a really good question. So take a look at this. Hopefully, yeah.
Let's go to your review.
That takes care of it. We'll bill it.
So here's the chart that Rabbi Weiner put in his book. If it's minimal risk, it's encouraged or even obligated. So in this category, we're talking about organ donation, what would be a minimal risk of parts of one's body that one could donate while they're alive? That would be a minimal risk. What would be an example? What? Kidney, maybe. Blood. What else? Plasma. What else? What is bone marrow?
Oh, barrel.
Yeah, I don't know. That's significant?
No.
Okay.
No, it's minimal. No, it's somewhere in between.
So significant would be a pious act, but not obligatory. I think that would be the case of the non-vital limb. That'd be a significant risk in some ways.
Doesn't even make sense.
What?
Well, kidney would be significant, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
No, you can do okay with one kidney,
Huh?
and you can do okay with one.
Yeah, but
kidney.
the act of
I mean,
removing,
but then you don't have a second kidney.
right, but the act of removing the kidney is significant.
I think it's talking about amount of risk to life. That's the cat.
Also,
That to me is,
the liver regenerates.
yeah, no, but I'm saying the act of going through the surgery on either of those things
Right.
is a significant risk.
Risk. So, and if it's very high, then it would be forbidden. It'd be it would be like forbidden to do it. So if you're, that's the case of if you're along in the desert, that would be a risk to your life. So you don't have to risk your life to save somebody else's life. Yeah.
I've read of circumstances where parents have a child.
Can you hear? You guys hear?
Parents have a child that needs a donation.
Yeah.
Of a kidney or perhaps bone marrow,
Yeah.
and so they decide to have a child,
Another.
Yes,
another
yes,
child to be the donor.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're asking what's the thought behind what's. Yeah.
Have you seen anything on that?
they've had children
Yeah.
with hopes that they would.
They would match.
Born as a
They would be a
match.
match. Mhm.
I have to look like deeper into that just to see the sides of it. That's a good question.
It's.
What's your question? Like, is that wrong to birth a child for that, or is it?
The parents weren't deciding to have a child,
Yeah,
and then decide to have a child to be a potential donor. And then the child themselves doesn't have. I say, yeah, that basically.
Yeah.
They have no.
that's a good
say.
question.
There's a lot of stories written
I
about it.
wasn't thinking there'd be an answer, but it's something.
There is an answer. I don't have it currently, but it's a good, yeah. All right, thank you. That's a good question. So let's just, I want to just finish this discussion here. So here's just a summary of views in connection to this, okay? So live organ donation. Rav Moshe Feinstein says one is not obligated to put themselves in potential danger, but they may do so if they choose. Rav Waldenberg, it would be an act of piety and permitted. Rav Ovadia Yosef, now that vast majority of kidney donors, this is in 1981, remain fully healthy, it is certainly a mitzvah to donate such organs. Okay, it's a positive thing. Rav Asher Weiss, in 2016, he is the rabbi that consulted Rabbi Weiner. He says, now that it's so safe and can benefit so much, it is pious, a mitzvah, and almost obligatory. If you're a match. So he doesn't want to say it's obligatory, but so okay, so here's just some notes from Rabbi Weiner's, like some of the notes that he had, but basically we kind of went through this. But we have here just like discussion of bone marrow, its levels of risk, basically. Here, if real danger of life exists, this connects to I think what Sherry asked. It would be forbidden, or you would be considered a righteous fool, right? To do it, to give if you're in danger of life, and even if it's a significant risk, we're not supposed to put ourselves in places where it's significant risk. Reish Lakish did it, but it's very interesting. Some say that that case is in the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud doesn't hold by that. Like we don't even put ourselves in significant risk to save other people. So, okay, so that's a little bit on that. That's live organ donation. We talked about organization after death. Goes by the moment of death, and that's the debate, and that's the whole different types of organ donation cards that people have. And we talked now about organ donation while alive. There's some interesting questions. One more interesting question after death is like your cornea. So we say that the reason why some of these prohibitions here, I'll show you. There's these prohibitions that we're thinking about when it comes to this. Don't mutilate the body, don't delay burial, don't receive benefit from the dead. That's what we're thinking about when it comes to donation after death. You're not really supposed to tamper with the body for these reasons. We say that these are overridden. Why? Because we have this value of saving a life. So these prohibitions are overridden because all prohibitions are overridden when you have a value of saving a life. Now, what about you like donating your cornea to somebody else? You're not necessarily saving their life, but you're helping them be able to see. So do these prohibitions get overwritten to help somebody be able to see better So that's an interesting question. There's debate around that. But these are serious prohibitions. You don't want to delay the burial. You don't want to mutilate the body. We don't mutilate the body. That's why cremation. One of the reasons why cremation is problematic and autopsies are problematic, if not mandated by law or from some other serious reason. Okay, Sharkoch. We're going to go on to our next topic, which is hospice, DNR, and life support. So it's a heavy topic. It's good to talk about though, and hopefully we'll do it in a careful and meaningful way. All right, so just to start out, this is a very famous person. I just wanted you to get to know him a little bit. So this is, I wrote an article about I worked as a chaplain in a hospice unit for a summer. This was the summer before I started working at Beth Tefillah. And it was a very heavy summer. I did one unit at chaplaincy. There's like 4 altogether, so I have 1 down. And I wrote an article I published, and this is kind of like about 1 day at hospice. It was a crazy day with like these 4 different things. I'll send it to you via email. Anyway, I just brought that here I have a video here from Amatai, that same organization, that's going to summarize all we're doing here in 4 minutes. So I want to make sure we have those 4 minutes to summarize what we're doing. Let's get going. Topics are withdrawing versus withholding, DNR, comfort measures, and intubation versus extubation. Okay, we'll talk about what that is. All right, the first discussion that's important for this, and this is Rabbi Weiner talks about this a lot, like in his different lectures, is how do you view the value of life? Okay, and that's going to inform. Sorry, I don't have myself on the video here. That's going to inform the whole discussion. So many hold that life is of infinite value. What does that mean, though? I'm using his terms. If you believe that life's of infinite value, no other values can contend with it. Life is of infinite value, meaning if you take it to its extreme, we should put all of our finances, all of our resources into saving lives instead of building roads or some other purpose. Meaning, if life is of infinite value, then you should do every single thing to make sure people are supported and that they stay alive. And you should do at all costs, make sure people stay alive, no matter what, no matter if there's extreme suffering. The value of life is of infinite value, and it overcomes the value of quality of life. Like staying alive would be of infinite value. There are views like that in some respects within Jewish tradition. The majority approach, and Rav Weiner holds by this, and so do I, is that we believe that life is, of course, is of extreme high value, extreme importance. Obviously, Judaism is all about life. Judaism pushed back against Egypt, highlighting life is important versus their gratifying. They were gratifying death. Yeah. But he uses the language, life is of relative value, meaning it's of extreme value, but sometimes other values are at play as well when we're trying to figure out what's the right decision. Another value that might come into the discussion would be quality of life. Somebody's at the end of their life, and they're on hospice. Let's say that the doctor says they're terminally ill, only have 6 months to live, but it's very clear that that's the case. There's no doubts about it. All their functioning is declining, etc. What should we make sure? Nevertheless, if life is of infinite value, we might want to say we should make sure that at a certain point when they can't breathe, they're for sure intubated. They're put on a tube, and that they'll live as long as they can, or perhaps if you do a lot to enable them to stay alive much longer, even without intubating them, you keep feeding them, you provide them everything they need in an extreme way, you extend their life, and that might be right if you're viewing life as infinite value. But if you view it as having relative value, then you might say life's extremely important. However, if they're suffering toward the end of their life, we should try to enable them to die in a respectful way and to live life with as much minimal pain as possible. So the pain and the quality of life might supersede in some cases the extension of life. And so that's kind of like the majority view, that we should try to maintain life as much as possible. You should try to save lives, etc. If it comes to a situation where the person might be suffering, we want to enable them to minimize as much suffering as possible while extending the life to the extent that we can. Those are the two values that are kind of at play with each other in tension in those moments. If you believe life is of infinite value, you wouldn't have any tension. It would just go with extending life as long as you can. So that's going to be like that's what he talks about here in this text. While there's much discussion in area, this sanctity is not necessarily unlimited. It is also possible to distinguish between viewing human life as possessing infinite value as beyond relative value. Some rabbinic sources regard all life as possessing infinite, unlimited value. According to the school of thought, everything possible must be done to prolong every moment of life, no matter how much pain is involved. Somebody's in extreme, excruciating pain. Extend their lives. Why? Because every moment in this world is another moment where they're alive, and they could perhaps have a positive thought of tshuva, or think about something Jewish. And every moment here, you'll never be able to get back, because once you go to the next world, that's it. So gain every moment you have here to gain something, you should. And also, there's a view that pain and suffering can cleanse you from sins. There's a view like that. So if they have some suffering, it's not the end of the world, because that might cleanse them. That's that view. Okay. The other view would be, since life is the ultimate value, these authorities argue must be prolonged at all costs. In contrast, most contemporary rabbinic authorities conceptualize life as being sacred, but of value relative to other values, such as adherence to certain mitzvot, and thus of not infinite value. For this reason, many authorities limit the extent to which one is obligated to prolong life of a dying patient in the face of tremendous pain and suffering. Someone's in tremendous pain and suffering. You can't withdraw. We're going to talk about the next topic. You can't withdraw their basic necessities that they need to live. But you do not have to do extra acts to enable them to keep staying in that pain. Okay, so we do not withdraw anything that would enable them to live basic functions like food or water or oxygen. However, if there's other measures you could take to keep them alive for extended period of time, but they're going to be in excruciating pain. If it's of relative value, you can weigh withholding that help and enable them to die in their natural way, in as minimal pain as possible. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. Go for it.
Prolonging life, where the life will be.
Can you hear over there?
Prolonging life.
Dad, can you hear?
Life will be in
Can I
vegetative
bring you? Is you okay? I just want to make sure they hear. Thank you. Now you know what Ted goes.
The question about prolonging life, when that individual be in a vegetative state, and you know that that person would not want to live that way, or it would create an incredible financial burden upon those that they love, that they also wouldn't want have created suffering through their staying alive.
That's a really good question. So that's a case where somebody's not terminally ill. However, they're going to be in a vegetative state for we don't know how long. Are there ways to, I guess, are you allowed to withhold assistance in some ways that would enable them to go through a natural process of death? I have to get back to you on that, because that's a complicated question. That I haven't.
But it's the one that we see.
Yeah, I
More and more.
yeah. Great questions today. Yeah.
Not terminal.
Rob has a question.
Because
Yeah.
we can do
Well, I
basic
think
things to keep people alive.
This is sort of getting towards hospice care, or what they do in hospice to ease pain and stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, people with their pets and how they feel like they're members of the family, that when they are at a point in life where the quality of their life is so bad and there's no hope for them or anything like that, and how we treat our pets so humanely with what we do at the end for them, that yet people have to go through such indignities and suffering and everything, where we.
You're talking about like assisted
Assisted,
suicide or euthanasia.
right,
So
and
that's actually a very good and important topic. That's not the topic today, but that's a good topic, like, the debated to include it in our curriculum, but we only have a minimal amount of time. That's it, Rabbi Weiner's dealing with that a lot because it's allowed, in where he lives,
But
in
isn't
California.
that where like hospice tends to go with?
No, so
increasing
that's the
morphine and
difference,
so forth?
that's what we're gonna see, so it's not really.
Yeah.
Jewish law would not, Jewish law is against assisted suicide. You can't do that in Jewish law. However, if somebody's already dying, you do not, we try to maintain them in a minimal way. If they're already dying, we do not have to support them living in all that pain, in the sense that we don't have to proliferate it anymore. But we do not withhold their natural process of dying. We do not cease their natural. We have to allow the natural process to take place. We can't end it. We do not have to proliferate it. We don't have to add on to it.
Well, you're not gonna, let's say, somebody that's not eating, you're not gonna, or
Somebody
give them
who,
a feeding tube, for example, that.
somebody who's expelling, that doesn't want to eat, you don't have to force them to eat. Everyone would agree on that. Somebody who's naturally dying, they only have a month to live, let's say. And you have a choice now. Should I extend their life to longer by giving them everything they need, or allow them to have their basic needs and allow the natural process to take place because they're in extreme excruciating pain and they're not in good shape? That's the discussion here. And Robert Weiner, myself, and others will fall on the side of being open to the idea that that excruciating pain and that comfortable living condition is of value vis-a-vis that in that situation. So we take that into consideration. All right, so let's do a little bit more. Okay, so here's the cases of withdrawing and withholding. So we talked about, this is kind of what you're talking about right now, Robert. We're not allowed to withdraw somebody's lifeline. What do we mean by that? Here's a case that's brought in our tradition. Here. A gosest is somebody who's terminally ill. They've been defined either 12 months or 6 months that they're going to for sure die. Okay. We may not tie up his cheeks or seal his orifices, nor can we place on his stomach. This is an early text. This is Tractate Smachot. This is over 1,000 years ago, or 1,500. I don't know exactly, 1,400 years ago. Nor can we place in his stomach a metal vessel or anything that cools his navel until he dies. Meaning we don't do anything extra to make them die. We don't pull the plug. We don't shoot them up. We don't inject them. We don't give them something edible or something that they ingest to make them die. We don't hasten the process. It's forbidden to do that according to Jewish law. We may not move him. We may wash him, or we place him on top of sand or salt until he dies. Meaning, if you know that these acts will hasten the dying process, you're not allowed to hasten it, not to speed it up. The question is, do you have to slow it down? That's going to be the question.
Oh, if somebody were in an accident and, you know, the hospital and they're intubated and there's no way they would be able to stay alive without.
So we're gonna talk about that. Technically, you're not allowed to remove the tube because that is causing their death. There are ways around it. So if you're already asking the question, I'll show you that right now. He brings here a few ways that he's seen as the head rabbi in Cedar Sinai, a huge Jewish hospital in LA. So you gradually wean the patient from the ventilator or lower the settings, as long as this will not cause immediate instability or death. Meaning, this option is not always medically possible, meaning you slowly wean the patient from the ventilator or lower the settings, and you don't cause them at each stage immediate death. But through time, their natural course of dying will happen, not through your immediate action. That's one way that some people do it. If patient extubated for some reason, you don't have to intubate them again. If there's removed for some reason, like let's say you needed to do some sort of procedure and you removed it momentarily or something like that, you're not obligated to put it back on. That's another way that some people will be able to like ensure that they don't have to suffer for many years on the tube. Here's an interesting direction that is offered, but people don't do this: a timer. So you set up a timer so that when somebody, because the complicated thing is someone gets to the hospital, many times you don't know what their situation is, and many times if you know that they're for sure going to die, maybe you wouldn't intubate them from a Jewish perspective, because then you can't take them off. You don't always know. So one direction that's offered, which he says halachically problematic, but he mentioned it, is to have a timer. So you'd have the intubation on a timer, so that it be on the person for a certain amount of time, and after a while the timer will go off. If they're able to live without it at that point, then great, and they don't need it. If they're not, then you at that point are able to remove the tube, because the timer went off and it's no longer providing them oxygen. So here are different ways that people figure this out with the intubations.
It sort of sounds like another loophole.
Yeah, it's complicated.
The shops.
Okay. So that's a few of the ways, but that's like a different topic. But we're already kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But I thought we just jumped there for a second. Let's go back here for a second. So you're not supposed to withdraw, like the tube. You're not supposed to withdraw. You're not supposed to move them in any way that you know is going to cause them to die quicker. We may not close his eyes. Whoever touches and removes him is a murderer. Rabbi Meir would compare him to a candle which is dripping. As soon as a person touches it, he immediately extinguishes it. So, like, let's say you're playing around with the wax or the oil, and you play around with it, it extinguishes it. So if you move somebody who's dying and you know that will cause them to die quicker, you shouldn't do it. So those are strict laws. You're not supposed to hasten the dying process. We're establishing that already, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch brings. It's our halacha. One in a dying condition is considered a living. So this is all the details that we saw. Okay, so let's see. So that's one side of it. Now the question is, we're not supposed to hasten it, but the question is, do I have to extend it? Well, obviously I should extend life as much as possible. We love life. Judaism is all about life. However, if the person's suffering tremendously, maybe I don't have to extend it beyond its natural course. I can't cease the course of death, but I should. Maybe I could just let it take its toll, and I'm allowed to withhold extra efforts that would extend the pain. So there's a discussion around this. It goes back to a story. This is the classic. I'm not going to go through every source here, but I just want to show you the central text. This is the central text that's brought in relation to this. Rav Moshe Feinstein brings this text. So he says, the maidservant of Rabbi, the case was like this. On the day that Rabbi died, the rabbis decreed a public fast because of his illness and begged for heavenly mercy. And they said, whoever shall say the Rebbe has died shall be pierced with a sword. Basically, Rebbe was dying. He was having tremendous pain, gastrointestinal illness. Okay, he had to keep going to the bathroom. He was in extreme pain. The rabbis all got together and they said, we're going to pray for Rebbe to stay alive. But Rebbe was perhaps terminally ill. He was suffering, and the maidservant of Rebbe recognized this pain because she saw it all the time. I guess she's assuming he's going to die, and they're just keeping him alive in this excruciating pain through their prayer. The more that they pray, the more he stays alive, but the more pain he's in. Okay, so what did she do? She's like, I have to stop this. What does she do? The above seek to take Rebbe, and those below seek to keep Rebbe. May it be his will that those below overcome those above. Once she saw the Rebbe enter the restroom many times, and that he had to remove and replace his tefillin each time, that he suffered greatly, she said, may it be his will that those above overcome those below. Meaning originally she thought the rabbi should win. They should pray the Rebbe should stay alive, no matter what he's going through. But once she saw all he was going through, she's like, no, above, they want him, let them take him in a peaceful way so you don't have to keep suffering. So the rabbis did not cease to pray for mercy. So what did she do? She's like, I have to get them to stop praying. She took a small earthenware vessel and threw it from the roof to the ground. The rabbis momentarily ceased praying for mercy, and Rebbe died. So you see from this text that she stopped them from paying. She stopped them from extending his pain, and because she knew that Shemaim, heaven, it was his time to die. So Rav Moshe Feinstein brings this text in this context. I'll show you his language. He says, it is certainly permitted to do anything actively to hasten his death. That's what we saw, although he's suffering. It's made clear by the Ramah, which I quoted here, but we don't have to see it inside. And one to do so would be a murderer. You can't hasten somebody's death. But it's also prohibited to do anything acting to prolong a life of suffering. So on one hand, we don't want to hasten to cause someone to die. On the other hand, Rav Moshe Feinstein, the central posek, he says we don't want to extend a life of excruciating suffering. So that's the tension. For him, it's of relative value. So to figure out how to navigate between those two sides. And when physicians claim that the patient cannot feel pain, this should not be believed, because they might be able to know. For behold, it seems that even the postponing of the exiting of the soul entails suffering, even if it's not perceptible to us. The person could actually be in extreme pain, even the doctors say they're not in pain. So we should take into considering that pain into consideration. So this Rav Moshe Feinstein teaches us, and others, the Ramah and others. The Ramah is a central posek. I have a bunch here, but we don't have to look at each one. But here's the Ramah. Here's the central posek for the Ashkenazi community in the 15th century. If there is aught which causes a hindrance to the departure of the soul, near that house there is a knocking sound, a woodcutter. Meaning there's a knocking, you can't, so let's see the cases that he brings. It's forbidden to hasten the death of one who is dying condition. One who's been in a dying condition for a long time and could not depart. The law is that we may not remove the pillow or the mattress from under him, just because some say that there are feathers from some fowl which cause death. Meaning, if moving this pillow is going to cause them to die, you can't do it. They may likewise not be moved from their place. That's going to cause them to die. You can't hasten death. But then he goes on to say, the Ramah, this is Rav Moshe Feinstein's basing himself on him. However, there's aught which causes a hindrance to the departure of the soul. The person's soul is naturally dying. You're hindering it. There's a hindrance, which is causing extension of pain. So for instance, there's a knocking sound outside, or a woodcutter, or their psalmist's tongue, and these hinder the departure of the soul. It is permitted to remove it from them, but there's no direct act involved in this, since he merely removed the hindrance. So you can remove a hindrance to the person dying, you can't actively cause them to die.
So,
I.e., if they're in excruciating pain and their quality of life is abysmal toward the end, you can't hasten their death. But you don't have to do extra things to enable them to continue living in that life of suffering. You can allow the natural process to go forward. And the question is, how do you allow that to go forward? That's going to be the next step that we're going to talk about in just a moment. Do not resuscitate is connected to this. Do not resuscitate basically means, we're going to talk about in a moment, which is if you see that in the end of your life, if you know that in your life you're going to be terminally ill, and resuscitating you, bringing you back to life, would cause you even more pain, excruciating pain in that moment. You're allowed, according to Jewish law, to sign a do not resuscitate order. But that does not mean that you're signing a do not care or do not treat order. Rabbi Weiner speaks about this, that we need to care for the people who are dying in a respectful and honorable way. That's what we did when we were in hospice care. We tried to care for the people in their final days, and we're going to see how you do that. So let me just sum up, and then we'll just address your question.
Okay.
To sum up, so far, you're not allowed to hasten death. We saw that. If somebody's actively dying and they're terminally ill and they're in pain, we do not have to extend that pain more than it is. So you can allow the natural course of death to take its route without extending the pain anymore. The question is, what measures do we have to take in those moments when you're not extending the death? You still have to take care of them and make sure that they're comfortable. So we're going to see, according to Jewish law, what are the recommendations? Yeah.
so, I mean, one thing is like, what about feeding? And-
That's what we're going to see right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's one thing. And the second thing is with the DNR, let's say you've done something and you've written it, and you're young and you're not at your time of death. You're not, this isn't, do you, because you've signed that, does that mean you don't resuscitate someone who is
Young.
prematurely in a situation?
I think if you've put it in your directive that you have a DNR and you didn't put any details, unless
So
Unless
does his,
your proxy, if you put somebody as your proxy, that's, that, you know, they would be, I imagine, I think they'd be the final word on that.
is that part of what he's written?
Yeah, am I
Well,
wrong?
hospital and you have a DNR.
Well, if you have a DNR and your proxy's there.
You're 50 years old and you.
If it's in
you
the
have a heart
moment, if
attack.
it's in the moment, you don't have somebody yeah, correct. You're correct. Most of the cases, they're not there, right? So if you have a DNR, you should put in your directive what directions you want, and that's why I say you should update
Right.
it consistently. And the most, if they find 4 directives in your files, they go by the most recent one. Okay, so,
One way of handling that is you can put the language of, if there's no possibility of a meaningful recovery.
yeah.
You can have qualifying language.
Correct.
as to what the DNR is gonna lead.
So that's what we're gonna see right now. Good. Thank you for all these segues into our discussion here. We're gonna see that exact thing. Here are the conditions to do. Here's some details on a DNR. Basically, I have a video here.
You wanted to play the video.
I wanna make sure I play that video. So.
Oh, we got 4 minutes.
No,
Give them 2
Three
minutes,
minutes.
6 minutes.
What time is it on my battery?
3 minutes.
Well, my battery ran out, so I don't know what time it is. So we're gonna keep going. No, so what time is it?
It's a likely story.
Okay. So just so you know, okay, I'm gonna touch on these 2 topics. If you give me till 8:05, watch the video start in like 4 minutes.
Yeah, go.
So here are the conditions you need in order to have a DNR. It should say DNR. According to like halacha. Number 1, expert medical opinion has determined that the patient is terminally ill. Right? If they didn't say that you're terminally ill, then that would not be a topic of discussion. Number 1, there's no chance of a cure. Number 2, the patient is heading towards death, meaning always you should resuscitate somebody. However, if they are terminally ill, there's no chance of a cure. The patient is suffering much, meaning if you're not suffering, and we're not going to see that the resuscitation is going to cause you suffering, you should do it. You should do resuscitate, not do not. We should try to enable people to stay alive. But if these conditions are met, you can do it. You can sign a do not resuscitate order. The patient is heading towards death, and such medical interventions can only minimally prolong life. Patient is suffering very much, physically or emotionally, even though he or she is receiving medication to control the pain. Number 3, the patient does not want to undergo resuscitation, meaning they have to agree. It's not want to undergo it. So it's allowed. It's allowed in those cases, and there's more information on that here. So this is an interesting debate. Moshe Feinstein says it's forbidden to provide medications or interventions to a dying patient who is suffering and cannot be cured, since this will prolong a patient's suffering. It's very strong language. Forbidden.
Did you send this out?
Yeah, I send this link out each time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Rav Auerbach says it's permissible to withhold medications that prolong the suffering of a dying patient, if that's their desire. But according to Rav Feinstein, it's forbidden. So let's see comfort measures, okay? There's a lot here, but it's kind of hard to see. But here is what you must provide. Okay, after we said we're not hastening the death, also we're not extending the suffering. In that time period, the hospice period, what are you obligated to do? You're obligated to keep them comfortable. Basic necessities: oxygen, nutrition, hydration. Here are some exceptions when you might not do it. Routine medications. Okay. Aggressive, extraordinary measures are not always required. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. Some say you're allowed to use morphine, even if Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says even if the morphine will eventually hasten it in a way, because it minimizes the pain, and with each shot of morphine, they're not dying immediately from that. There's room to say that if it will enable them to not suffer as much pain in that time, you're allowed to administer that as well. Harmful nutrition, you're not allowed to provide, meaning if they're not eating, they're expelling the food. You're not supposed to force feed them. They're expelling the liquids or whatever. Liquids are more vital than food in those times. Apparently. So that's a little bit on that. There's a lot more to talk about, obviously. Our personal chef there has an interesting opinion. He says that a person has a choice. If they don't want extreme measures, even hydrogen and oxygen for machines, they have a choice to say, I don't want that. Meaning just even the comfort measures, they have a choice to say, I want it or not. It's another withholding. We're not withdrawing. We're not like hastening their death. But he says we can even withhold oxygen or nutrition if they want that. Our first Schafter is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University.
That's suicide though. They're saying, I want to die. It's euthanasia.
That's not euthanasia because you're not shooting yourself. You're not actively causing yourself to die. You are actively dying. Your disease is killing you, and you're just not extending your life expectancy through these measures.
That's halakhically correct.
He says that Rav Hershel Schafter says it's up to the patient. What?
I said, Rabbi Schechter is not one to doubt in the halachic
Yeah,
process.
he says that he says it's up to the patient, but he says something like extreme measures. So it could be oxygen and hydrogen through hydrogenation and oxygen through machines. So,
But not food.
there's 4 views on this. He's one of them. I just brought an extreme view. He's not the central view. He's an outlier. The central view, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, you have right to sign a DNR, but you must give the basics. Is Rav Feinstein says this as well. That's the mainstream view. I just thought I brought that because he's someone you can rely upon. But the mainstream view is that you have to give the basics: hydration, oxygen, food, morphine for pain.
So they hydration and oxygen, but through machines.
Through machines, yeah. Meaning not through the ventilator. Because with the ventilator,
Right.
you get yourself in that whole problem. You can't take it off. Okay, so that's the video, and then we'll part for today. 1 second. I just want to share the sound.
Blue is triggered.
Again, so this is going to put all the material we talked about together in one video. You'll see this video, like, oh, I understand this, I know this, I understand that. You're going to see the basis of what they're saying. They're not going to give you the sources, but you learn the sources. So you know now, okay? So this is going to be a good one.
We're here in the ICU, the intensive care unit.
By the way, this is the rabbi who wrote the book on ethics of the fighters. So he's also involved with this.
Suddenly, a patient's heart stops beating. A code blue is triggered. Here's what can happen next.
When a patient's heart stops beating, our first thought is to start CPR, which means we do chest compressions and start IVs to give medicines to try to help get the heart beating again. It's an intervention that can save life, but may also come with costs. At times, we feel ribs break under our hands. Sometimes these efforts work to bring back a heartbeat, but sometimes they do not.
Generally, we will.
So that's the danger with the resuscitation, is that you can really damage somebody's ribs. Let's say somebody's a 90-year-old person, and you resuscitate them, and you're causing immense damage to their body, and might be a very small chance that they're going to live through that, but they'll go through excruciating pain through that.
Always want to do CPR and attempt to resuscitate people. Jewish law emphasizes and often requires the preservation of life.
That's Jason Weiner.
The general principle is that we do everything we can to prolong life. So if someone collapses on the basketball court, we of course do CPR. And in the hospital, if a generally healthy patient goes into cardiac arrest, say after surgery, we'll do everything we can to save them. Why wouldn't we attempt to resuscitate? After all, it's our natural impulse to save someone and at least to try. But occasionally, it may not be the right thing to do. The simplest case when we don't resuscitate is when it's clearly medically inappropriate. Sometimes the body is too frail and weak to do such an aggressive procedure. A more challenging case is when the patient is terminally ill, suffering, and no longer wants to endure such pain. When a situation has these 3 factors, a DNR, a do not resuscitate order, may be appropriate.
We kind of mentioned some of those factors.
In their condition, resuscitation might just prolong dying or cause a very painful death instead of extending life.
A DNR means that if the patient's heart stops beating, the medical staff will not initiate CPR through chest compressions or electronic defibrillation. Similarly, the medical staff won't initiate artificial respiration, called intubation, which would insert a tube into the airway. Instead, we don't intervene. In fact, some hospitals refer to this as an AND order, allow natural death.
Jewish law prohibits doing anything to hasten a patient's death, even by a moment, and
You learn that, right? So all these details you learn.
even if the patient is already dying. But we are not obligated to proactively begin to administer interventions that briefly extend a life of pain and suffering at the end of life. Many Jews will instinctively not agree to a DNR, and many times a DNR is not appropriate, and one should certainly not feel coerced to agree to one. However, there are circumstances in which it would be halakhically appropriate to withhold CPR in order to passively allow nature to take its course.
There are generally 3 conditions under which a DNR may be permissible, or possibly even recommended if all 3 conditions are met. 1. Expert medical opinion has determined that the patient is terminally ill.
3 conditions.
That is to say, there is no chance of a cure and the patient is heading towards death in the coming months. Any medical intervention can only minimally prolong life. 2. The patient is suffering, physically or emotionally, even though they are receiving medication to control the pain. 3. The patient does not want to undergo resuscitation. They feel they've endured too much already and don't want additional interventions that have limited benefit. When all of these conditions have been met, the Torah permits a compassionate response of allowing the dying process to occur naturally with appropriate palliative care. In conversation with one's rabbi and healthcare provider, a patient or their agent may agree to a DNR.
It's important to stress that even when a DNR order has been agreed upon, we must continue to provide attentive care, the basic necessities of life.
This is the health measures that we talked about. So hastening, extending pain, and now here's the health measures.
And ensure that the patient does not suffer. Basic oxygen supplementation should also be provided to alleviate discomfort. DNR does not mean DNT, do not treat. DNR does not mean DNC, do not care. Sometimes we don't perform aggressive efforts, but we always care for our patients and loved ones.
All right, so kind of.
So we could have come, just watched the video, that would have been it and been home by then.
You could have done that, but you probably wouldn't have understood it.
Right.
The proper way. But I'm happy that you came.
I'm happy I came too, I always am.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. It's a heavy topic. I'm sure it left you with a lot to think about, probably a lot more questions. We'll continue talking about it next week. So next week, we're gonna go over the. Next week, we do have class.
Yeah.
Sorry, next week we have class, and then the next 2 weeks we don't.